All right, got a heck of a presentation going tonight. You know, it's not very often we get a professional in here. And he comes with a reputation. I hope he goes ahead and just shows you why he's thought about so well. But John Magill is going to be our presenter tonight. I hope you enjoy what he's going to put forward to us. And John, it's your stage.
Thank you, Steve. I don't know everybody here because I've only been here for a little while, but I've been turning, I don't know, almost as long as Dick. 30 years ago, my wife gave me a lathe for Christmas. She was at work one day and she says, "John's got every tool known to man. What can I get him for Christmas?" And somebody at work said, "Does he have a lathe?" And she says, "I don't know, what's that?" And so she bought me a lathe. And I hadn't seen a lathe since like junior high school shop. And so I'm like, okay, what do I do with this? So I went to a class at Woodcraft. This was up in Seattle. And the guy teaching the class, you know, we had a good class and kind of learned some things. And he says, "Oh, by the way, we got a group. We get together once a month. You might want to come." And so I went, and that was the Seattle AAW. And when I went to that first meeting, you know, I thought lathes were for stair ballisters and bowls. And I walked in, and the show and tell table was the thing that just blew me away. And I was hooked immediately. And, you know, so one of the things that I always like to say is I had a curmudgeonly friend up in Portland area. We were talking about something because I was going to go to some symposium, and he says, "Oh, I quit going to symposium years ago, da da da." And I said, "I go all the time because there's a gem in every demo. Even if you've turned that thing 100 times, the demonstrator's going to tell you something you haven't heard before, so I hope you get a gem out of something tonight." So usually I'm demonstrating ornamental turning, and I start that with, "Hi, I'm John. I'm an ornamental turner." And, you know, you get the, "Hi, John," but tonight I'm just going to say, "I'm John, and I turn threaded boxes mostly." I'm just going to pass around some stuff. I'm going to pass around a lot of stuff tonight. So, "Hi, John." Yeah, you're supposed to say, "Hi, John." Nobody hears that. Nobody here is from that crowd. Yeah, exactly. They only got to step one. When we were talking in the Saturday coffee group about what to do for a demo, I do a lot of different things, but we were tossing some ideas around, and Paul mentioned one of his ideas for a potential demo was pepper mills. And I've turned a lot of pepper mills, but I didn't have time to do one this week. But what I did do is I brought what I'm going to do tonight, you could do on certain kinds of pepper mill kits. Not the kits that have the little knob on the top that you have to screw on. You could do that. I wouldn't try it. But there's two kits that I came across based on Paul saying something. I went and looked, and there's a kit from PSI. I'm going to pass this around, and it's kind of a clear-bodied, you epoxy the top and bottom on that you turn. And I brought some of those. If people want to buy those for what it cost me and turn those as your challenge after you see the rest of the demo. And then there's a fancier kind of a crush grind kit, and they're both ceramic, so they're both nice grinders. These are, if you've ever seen the crush grind mechanisms, the typical crush grind mechanism is really complicated. So I put that sheet on here so you can see it. That's how ugly it is with the recesses and everything inside. But the one that they released recently is called the Crush Grind Easy, and it's just 5 screws and a couple of drilled holes or hollowed out holes. Anyway, I brought a bunch of those kits if anybody wants to do that as your idea for the challenge. So these are $9. The Crush Grind are $18. That's what it cost me. If you want them, I've got some. So I turn threaded boxes. When I went to that first meeting in Seattle, I saw a threaded box on the table, and I had never seen a threaded box. And I was hooked immediately, and I've been turning them for 30 years. But the way that I learned to turn them was I went to Aeromont about 30 years ago, I guess now. And I learned to turn threaded boxes from Bonnie Klein. And back in the day, we were mostly doing chatter work on the top. And so this first box that's going around has chatter work on the top and on the inside, and you can kind of see that's a very simple way to do embellishment on a lid. It's a great way to, get something interesting on the top. We did it with a chatter tool. It's a kind of a learned technique, but it works really well. When I went to Aeromont to learn about that, Aeromont if you've ever gone to any of the crafts type schools, they have their store on campus and they've got all kinds of materials and supplies for other things that people do. And there happened to be a polymer clay class there, and so they were doing some things, and they had this powdered metal that people use in the polymer clay, and so I bought some and tried it out, and this is the very first attempt with it, was cutting a groove. It's really, really fine powder, but with that and some thin CA glue, you could actually get it to look like metal. And I brought this crappy example in, which was like a really first prototype ever try, and then this is a subsequent one same week, but once we figured out how to get it to work with the thin CA, this is copper and steel, and these are 2 brass ones, but they had like 6 different metals, super fine powder, and it worked really well. It was a kind of a cool thing. Then while we were in the class, Bonnie, who's been turning forever, she did a lot of acrylic boxes, really small, threaded, polished on the inside, polished on the outside. And I said, well, what if we used acrylic and made it as an insert? And so I tried that in the class. And I said, that had some interesting effects. And so I was just trying to do all kinds of different things with materials we had around. And that was yet another example of a different kind of thing you could do for a lid to make it different. And then this box I just brought as an example of, you can drill and insert things. This one happens to have, this is not a threaded box, it's just a slip fit. But these are dowels that were just placed in the top, and these were dowels that were just glued in the side, and then the box was turned away. And so there's a lot of ways to take those ideas and run with them. But what we're going to do tonight is what I do for most, or a lot of my boxes. I was going to say, I'm not going to talk about finials. I do finials. I'm not going to do a box demo. I'm just going to talk about lid embellishments. And the 2 things that I do a lot that I really like because they're a nice way to highlight the wood and contrast it are just inserts that go in the lid. So this first excuse me, this first one is what got me started on what I called horizon boxes. And so I like pieces of wood, scrap wood that I take that's left over from something else that has an interesting horizon or a landscape or things like that. And I'll pass a bunch of examples around. But I do that, and then I do these double style inserts. This one happens to be a slightly contrasting wood and then a burl in the top. And so you'll see examples of that, and I'll pass those around too. But that's what we're going to do for the demo tonight. Those are 16 threads per inch. So I think, what do you have a thread, you have a chefware? Yeah. So yeah, the 16 works, I think, in almost all wood varieties. You don't have to have a really super dense wood. I learned in that first maple box going around, hard maple was wonderful with 16 TPI. Okay, so I'm going to pass around what I always do. Let's do a demo first, just before we dive into the other one. So there's a bunch of simple things you can do to decorate lids. And the easiest one is probably to do a technique that we've all seen before, depending on your favorite tool. Where am I, Dan? Okay. Looks like I'm looking at somebody's welder outside. I have a couple of point tools. Depending on what you like to do, there's a lot of people have just 3-point tools where they're sharpened on 3 facets. And I also make kind of a skew-like tool that just is sharpened on the 2 sides and has a flat top. And these work great if you're doing decorations on the side of a cylinder. Sorry, this weird, I have to use one of Reed's tool rests because the other one couldn't get up high enough to use a scraper, or the monster was too big. Anyway, you can use the technique that a lot of people do on the sides is just putting grooves. And so you can go in and put grooves with either one of these point type tools. And I'll tell you, somebody made a comment in a demo recently where they said, you know, they always do 3. And I learned from somebody early on, you can put 2 grooves together and they always look perfect. As soon as you put the 3rd groove in, trying to get it exactly spaced, your eye can tell if it's off by a bazillionth of a millimeter. And so just doing it, you know, doing 2 grooves and then moving over and doing 2 more grooves is a great way to do it. You can do grooves on the end grain or on the side grain. If we do them, we'll do some on the end grain here too. Same thing, you can just go straight in with the point tool. And a pair of grooves always looks good together. 3, like I said, try doing 3 and getting them spaced correctly. One thing that a lot of people have done way back when, if you haven't made one before, this is just a wire burning tool. And it works great for side grain. You just go in here, this is nichrome wire. You apply a little pressure, you get some smoke. And you get a nice burned line. And that's easy to do on the side grain. But you can't get the wire to go into a groove on the end grain. So what do? The trick to do that is just get yourself a piece of, go to the hardware store, get a piece of Formica sample, you know. I usually round off the ends and corners so that, because this stuff is deadly, but you can just take your Formica and shove it into the groove that you've cut. And you can get the same burned effect in the end grain. With some pressure. Yeah. Do you use your wife's credit card? Not much to it, but I'll pass them around just so you can see. That one's still warm. Everybody, you know, chucks are like religion and motor oil. I use Talon. I use one-way Talon chucks. I had 2 one-way lathes before we moved. I had a 2436 and a 1018, the smaller one, and I ended up selling both of those and buying a 1224 because almost everything that I do is small-scale work, and the 1224 has a 1-inch 8 spindle, so all the lathes in my shop have a 1-inch 8 spindle, and life is good. I have to use a spindle adapter here for this tonight, so not a big deal, but I'll pass these around too, just so you can see. On these, because I use an ornamental lathe, I'm able to turn 3 lobes on the side of these, and for a point tool, that's handy because you can have your finger on top or your thumb on top, and you know where the edge is, where the cutting edge is. So those are just homemade point tools, ground. Okay. Those are a couple of simple things like the chatter work and the burning that you can do if you don't want to go any further. But what we're going to talk about tonight is doing inserts. And so I'm going to talk all about the inserts, but the best way to get that talk started is to pass this around. I just put a bunch of bins in here so you could see. On the one side are the raw insert blanks that I'm going to talk about in a second. And then I have one with a bunch of these, what I call like landscapes or horizons, spalted wood, and then dark pieces, and then light pieces, and then some sort of special accent type pieces. So I'm just going to pass them around. If you want to steal some, help yourself. Just make sure most of them get around the room so people can see what they're like. With the inserts, what I do, we used to, yeah, don't drop it. You'll be picking them up for an hour. When I first started turning, we used a lot of face plates. And so I evolved faceplates to do different things, like I put weird exotic woods on a piece of a block that I've drilled and tapped and threaded with CA glue. And I did that a lot to do all kinds of different things. You can put you can have one for dedicated pieces of exotic wood or whatever. But then quite a few years ago, we came up, Bonnie was out doing some demos someplace, and she learned about using nylock nuts, which you can just buy from any hardware store. And then it turns out that if you turn out the nylon part, they cinch up very nicely on a lathe spindle. And so I'll pass these around, but here's an example of just a faceplate-like. Here's a nylock nut, and here's what I'm going to use and show you in the demo here in a second. This is drilled and tapped to go on the tailstock, which is 3/4 10 on my tailstock. So what I'm going to do for the first part of the demo is I'm going to do what we call kind of a compression chuck. And I'll pass this pair around. We've talked about some stuff. I can't remember, Ralph. We were talking about turning spheres on one of the Saturday things. And so I brought this set in that this is a compression chuck, and I'm going to use these to do the demo here in a second, but the idea is the same, and I'll pass these around after I use them. This side is drilled and tapped to go onto the thread on my tailstock, and this side just has a tenon on it so I can grab it in the chuck, and then I can just put any workpiece between it. These I'm going to pass around. I was making like marble-sized spheres, and you have to keep turning on the spheres, but you have to have the spheres under compression when you're turning. And so this is just an example so you can see that's how the compression chuck idea works. You'll see also when I pass these around, oh, it's up here. Every demo, I've done thousands of demos in my life. I had to do it for a career. And every demo, something goes wrong. And my wife was saying something to me today, and I said, I don't normally get nervous about demos, but I got butterflies today because I know I'm going to forget something. The magic tool for the tailstock. So on my pieces, you'll see on these, I letter these, and I letter all of my chucks. This chuck happens to be letter E. But what I do all the time also, you'll see it on all the work pieces here, on any piece where I turn a tenon and I have to take it out of the chuck and I know I'm going to put it back in to do something else again, like this operation, I always put the chuck's letter and the number 1 jaw, and I mark 2 marks on the number 1 jaw so that when I put this piece back in, and the Talon chucks and all the one-way chucks have sort of fairly aggressive teeth on the chuck jaws, but you can kind of put your workpiece in and wiggle it a little bit, and you'll feel when it drops into those notches, and then just reef on it. And assuming this lathe is good, it's going to be dead true. And so that's one of the nice things about being able to do that with marking your chuck jaws and being able to get back to where you want to be. The other slide rest couldn't get high enough, so I'm using Reed's Robo Rest backwards. So in that box that I passed around, the first tray, there were just a bunch of random, cut off pieces. And so what I do is, we all have wood scraps. They're all, a lot of them turn out to be interesting wood scraps. And to me, most of the wood scraps either end up as pen blanks. I have a huge box of pen blanks to give to Lorraine when she comes back. And I also added to it with some stuff that Dean brought in. But everything is either a pen blank or it's going to be an insert. And so I have boxes of these inserts at home that I turn when the wood, I get the wood, I say, that's got some interesting grain in it, and I chuck it off to the side. So I've just got a box full of chunks of wood. Then I go downstairs, and on the bandsaw, I just slice off slices that are about 1/4 of an inch thick. And that way, I've just got something to work with. I don't care what shape they are. If it's a particularly dense wood, I might clip the corners off. If it's not that bad, I'll leave the corners on. Because this next operation, I'm just going to turn it into something round. So let's start with one of these, and now you'll see why this is called a compression chuck. Hey, John? Yep. Are we supposed to just help ourselves to these? Yeah, just don't take all the accent pieces, but help yourself. Yeah. If you think you don't know how to turn one like that, then I usually say I keep these things. I treat this kind of like meditation. I have all my chunks that I throw in a big box, and then I go down to the bandsaw and I slice them off into all these little slices. And then on a given day, when I'm just in the mood that I want to just sit at the lathe and not think about anything, I'll just sit there and I'll turn a bunch of these into those final forms that you see there. No, and that's exactly why I turn thousands of them, because then when I'm ready to turn a piece, I'll go through I'll pillage through the lights. Oh, I want a dark ring here, and so I'll find a nice dark one, and however big that is, I'll find an interesting, piece that's going to go in the middle of it that's small enough that it'll work together with those. And so it's, I kind of hunt and peck, but if I've got thousands in my box to choose from, sort of semi-sorted, then I don't have to think about it. I have never gone and intentionally taken a piece of wood to turn it to be an insert the size for the box that I'm working on. So this is a compression chuck. I stand out of the line of fire. It's not a really big piece of wood. It's probably not very dangerous, but I still don't want to get whacked by it. It's going to take me a second. I'm using the RoboRest backwards, hoping to not smack the chuck. I don't know how many people have been turning all their lives, but I find a lot of new turners are afraid to use their gouges to feel the wood. And I always say I feel the wood. I can just come up with the back side of the gouge, and I can rub the wood to find where it is, and then I just go off to the side, and now I can just start cutting the wood. I don't have to think about it because I know where it was. And when I talk about doing this as sort of a meditation thing, I'm just going to sit here and turn this till it's round. I'm going to use the back of the gouge to feel the wood. It's not round yet. I can tell by the sound too. But I'll just sit there for an hour one day and just crank out inserts. I don't know if you looked at the inserts in the box very closely, but once they're round, I'll usually put a little bit of a chamfer on the back side. I take that out and put the next one in, and I just keep going. If you have an audio book to listen to or your favorite tunes, it's really, it's something you don't have to think a lot about, and you can just sit there and turn all day. I'm gonna tell you that in 2 seconds. I'm gonna pass it around together with this. I always look at the horizon to just see that I want a perfectly flat edge, and I want to put that chamfer on the back side. And I'll explain that when we get to it later too. So you can see how this just becomes a almost meditative thing that you're just working away on. Now the reason for wanting the material on here for the friction and a little bit of the compression is this is a piece like I was talking about before. I call these landscapes or horizon pieces. I kind of see a mountain peak, or if you turned it over, maybe it's a valley between two mountains or whatever. I want to be able to get that part so that it's going to play in the box lid that I'm eventually going to turn with it. And because I have this sort of friction-y stuff, I can move this around anywhere, but I want to center that piece. I want to pick out the part that I want to highlight and put that smashed between these. It's wildly off-center now, but that doesn't matter because it's a small piece, and I did what I wanted to do to get the picture out of it. So when I pull this out, it'll have that in there as the centerpiece on the item. Yep. Powdered brass with thin CA glue. And then overfilled, don't use accelerant because the accelerator will make it bubble. And then just sanded and buffed. And that powder was about like baby powder. Anyway, I can sit and do that for hours at home. I'm going to pass, where am I on the, yeah. I'll pass these around, but I need them back because I'm going to do this for the real demo. I'm going to turn the pieces that you'll actually see. This is like chewing bubble gum and walking there. Start it here. There's the chucks, and there's drill rod or high-speed steel. I usually buy just high-speed steel and grind it. Yeah, so this is, where'd the piece go? Oh, here it is. So on the compression chucks, this is a piece of rubberized cork that I glue on there. You can feel it. It's got a little squishiness and it's got some stickiness, so it's nice. And when you put those pieces between there, they're not going to go anywhere. Lee Valley tools. I got a roll that'll last you a lifetime, but it's a really good material. I used to use leather. I've used sandpaper. I've done all the other tricks, but this stuff is the cat's meow. It's relatively cheap, and it glues well with regular. I use yellow glue for almost everything. Yeah, well, you can't tell what it is anymore because it's in one of these bottles. But I won't use it tonight in the demo, unfortunately. So to turn the things that were just going around, I was going to talk about a slightly different technique. For those compression chucks for the tailstock, in the old days, I drilled and tapped for 3/4 10, which is the thread on here. But I'm not going to do that anymore. And the reason is I'm going to go to more of these style nylock nuts. You can get these in 3/4 10, or you can use a spindle adapter that goes from 3/4 10 to 1" 8. And I think I'm going to now start doing everything so that even my tailstock is 1" 8 and my spindle's 1" 8, so I can do them both. But I thought I'd pass this around. Here's just a nylock nut and a Beal collet with a bolt in it so that I could thread that on, because whether you're threading on, all the pieces I have are being passed around, but if you're threading on the compression chuck, you have to turn it. You can do it by squeezing it between the two and hoping it's going to be good enough to turn, but I've always just at least roughed them on the spindle and then moved it to the tailstock. But these are just parts. If you haven't seen them before, There's a spindle adapter that goes 3/4 10 to 1" 8, or whatever your spindle is, and then a Beal chuck with a piece of a bolt in it. I don't know if, have people used a lot of face plates or grown up with face plates? I love face plates. The only downside is you typically either have to use double stick tape, which I moved away from years ago, or wait for glue to dry. But I'm going to pass these around too. When I teach box classes, I just glue these onto a blank. So this is the box blank in the middle. And I give a student this thing, and it's got a 1" 8 nut on each end. It's been glued together like this. And the first thing you do is you part them so that you have the lid and the base, and then you start the process of making a box, which is hollow out the female thread and thread it. But I'm just going to pass this around so you can kind of see why it makes sense to do glued face plates to use for a lot of things. And once you have that face plate, it's just, it's a face plate with a waste block, and now you can just glue anything on and work on it, take it off the lathe, move it to another lathe, and keep going. All right, we talked about inserts. You know how to make inserts. You know you're now going to have a bag full or a box full or whatever, bins full separated of inserts. So now you're ready to do something with those inserts. How do you do it? Well, the easiest way is to go to a demo, but every time I've ever seen a demo, you can never get close enough to see all the steps. So I had this idea a couple days ago, and I decided to make the storyboard for you. And so this is going to be the sequence of events that we're now going to do a double insert. I take the piece, I turn it, I put finish on, and I mark it with pencils roughly for pencil lines so I get some concentric idea for where I'm going to go. I open it up, I glue in the first piece, I work on that first piece, make a recess, glue in the second piece, and finish it. And so here's the entire demo on one board. I'm done now, I'll go home. No. What? Yeah, exactly. That's for the slow learners in the crowd. I just thought that was an easy way to be able to show everybody the steps, and you could hold it and see it as opposed to what you're going to see on the camera. Tell me if you think it's a good idea, and I'll do it for other demos. Okay, so now we're going to do a double insert, just like this piece that's going around the room. I'm just going to take some crappy scrap wood. Oh, no, I'm not. The cork well, yeah, I'll start with this. I don't care. Again, because I mark pieces as I put them in the chuck, I have no fear of taking it out and putting it back in. That's normally the thing that would stop me. Like if I'm making a box at home, I have 2 chucks. The wood goes in those chucks, and it doesn't come out until they're done. We need to get a better tool rest for the club. Why would I teach classes? We don't have any, as far as I know, we don't have anybody that has space to do a class. I have done that, like Southern Oregon Woodturners, we just brought in a bunch of mini lathes and we did a box class. If we want to do that and somebody's got space, I'm happy to do that, but that's a different demo. This is just a piece of scrap wood. I'm just going to true up the face to make sure we have a good starting point. And you don't have to do too much here because all the middle is going to be gone, right? The first thing we're going to do is get rid of all that to put an insert in it. But what I am going to do, run out of space here. I'm not going to do a lot of sanding, but I'm going to do a little sanding. I always want to finish the top of the piece before I start any of the insert work, because if you're using like that sample thing that's going around, the wood, the outer dark wood is king wood, and that'll bleed into the maple if you don't do something ahead of time to sand it and put a finish on it to seal it. You'll end up with the dark of the king wood or blood wood or anything you're using like that. You'll end up with that bleeding into the maple and create a no pun intended, bloody mess. So I'm working off of my gouge. I typically start at 120, and I'm only going to go to 400 here. So 120, 240, 320, and 400. Yeah, thanks. Did I mention I only do small stuff? I usually don't have to worry about standing in the firing line or many of the other issues that a lot of people deal with. I think I mentioned, I forgot who did the demo, but whoever did the demo that used Pens Plus a little while ago got me hooked on this stuff. And so this is the Pens Plus that we're now getting as part of the club. It's shellac, alcohol, walnut oil, and microcrystalline wax. And a little goes a long way, which I learned pretty quickly. I put like 2 drops on the paper towel, rub it in, and then apply some pressure so it gets plenty of friction and it's nice and warm. Mike Meredith's instructions say wait a couple seconds between coats so it cools. I put basically 1 more drop on, turn it just by hand to wipe it evenly, turn the lathe on, apply pressure. I'm just using a paper towel, either blue or white, whatever you like. Yeah, I kind of go back and forth depending on what I'm doing. But okay, so now that's just like the first block on the demo piece there. It's Pens Plus. It's walnut oil plus shellac, a little bit of alcohol, and microcrystalline wax in it. Doctor's Woodshop Pens Plus. I put it in a different bottle because I just want a little bottle because I'm only doing it drops at a time. It normally is in the quart bottles or whatever size we have them back here. It's good stuff. So there we just did step 1. The cork inserts that were going around, can I get those back? Thank you. So I'm pretending like I'm doing this in the sequence, at home on a box or whatever. I've turned the top portion of the box that I'm gonna, and I've put the finish on there. That's now the top of my box that I'm gonna put an insert into. And so now I go scrounging around in my bin and I find, oh, I'd like a piece of, in this case, some kingwood will be a nice dark contrast for that contrasting outer ring on this maple. Spend more time messing around with the tool wrist. What I do here is I just try to visually look down, turn the headstock, and see that I'm sort of roughly centered on this one because I want the largest possible blank out of this for my box without, there's no pattern on this. This is just a bland dark wood, so I don't really care what I'm not intending to get anything out of it other than the maximum circle I can get. And again, this isn't deadly, but I try not to stand in the line of fire when you're just holding something between the spindle and the tailstock like this. Once it's round, I'm not as worried. I just turn that round, put a little chamfer on the back side. I'm going to show you, I'll talk about that in a couple seconds when I get there. What happens is it creates, because the chamfer is there, as you get close with your fit, you feel it kind of getting grippy as it's trying to go into the recess. And now you just have to sneak up on it because there's nothing more frustrating than cutting it too big. Then you go back to that box of inserts and pick the next bigger one. In this case, I'm taking a piece, this is going to be my landscape piece, exactly like the ones going around on the sample. It's from the same wood. And I'm going to try to get that horizon line in the middle of these compression chucks just to get that part of it centered on the picture, the site picture, so to speak. Again, I just sort of feel the wood with the back of the bevel or the back of the gouge, and then I could just start cutting. Did somebody ask something? Because I didn't hear it. Okay. It's just one of the hecklers in the back there. Yeah, you ought to come hang out with us on Saturday morning. There's a lot of heckling. I think Ralph takes the brunt of it. Especially if Jim's there. But I'm not naming any names. Yeah, everybody gets their turn. Okay, so now I have turned, if you can see these, I've got what's going to be my outer piece and my inner piece, and they look like they're pretty good. They're just like what I passed around there in the sample bin. So now I can go back to working on the box part or the lid part. This is the main reason at home why I just have those bins of the inserts. You can take your box that's in the chuck, pick out inserts that look like they're the right proportion for what you're going to do, and you don't have to muck around going back and forth with, trying to get different pieces to, in and out of the chuck to try to get two things to work. Okay. I don't like wood turner's elbow, even though I don't have the point in there. Yeah. Oh, is that? Oh, thank you. I'm like, I swear it was there. So now what I do typically is I turn the lathe on and I give myself a target. I always set the tool rest so I have enough of a gap here so I can get the piece in and out, because I'm going to have to do some fitting a couple of times. And I just kind of put a couple pencil lines here just as a visual. Okay, I got to go bigger than that, just so I have a place to aim for when I start doing the scraping. I'm going to use, this is a D-way scraper. And actually, D-way used to be, a friend of mine, Dave Schweitzer, started D-way. That's where the D came from. It was actually, before that, it was another Dave. But now Jimmy Allen runs the company, and Jimmy Allen is a box maker, and he started making, his tools were Boxmaster tools. And so that's, if you are confused when you go to the D-way website and you see Boxmaster and D-way, Dave Schweitzer and the Dave before him started because they were bowl turners. They were making bowl gouges and some spindle gouges. But Jimmy Allen, who eventually took over the company, was making boxes. So the line of Boxmaster tools is, I think, just exceptional for doing this kind of stuff. These are all negative rake scrapers. So there's a bevel on the top and a bevel on the bottom. They're about 70 degrees on the bottom and I think about 20 or 25 degrees on the top. When you buy them, they include a little sort of sharpening card to help you set up your grinder to get the right angles. I brought my platforms to show you, but I won't have to sharpen, so I don't think I can talk about them, but unless anybody wants to see how they work, there's nothing critical. I'm going to turn a shallow recess, just like the one on that second piece in the box. You could, but on this particular tool, I've got a really sharp, slightly less than 90-degree angle on the tip, because I want to be able to get all the way over to the side here and have a vertical edge where that recess is, but I want to be able to use the tip, the square end of the tool there to clean out the flat part, but then know that I'm going to be right on there at the edge with a vertical wall where the insert's going to go in. And another thing, a lot of people, I don't know who taught me the first time, but your lathe is a wonderful tool, not just because it spins the wood, but it's a visual tool. And so when I'm doing things here and I'm going to do this edge that I know I want to be perfectly perpendicular, I'm looking straight down on the edge of the tool here, and I'm looking through it to the bedways. And I'm aligning that cutting edge with the bedway so that I know that I've got a perfectly parallel to the spindle cut at the end of my cut there. But I also keep a little 6-inch rule handy for a couple of things. I put it into this recess and I can rock it to see, oh, I've got a high spot in the center. And if I put it flat, I can also look straight down on this tool and see if it's tilted out this way relative to the bedways or in that way. I'm not flat on the bottom of my recess. And so this is another good visual tool to help you dial in your recess. it's not, it doesn't have to be perfect, but the flatter it is, the better it's going to be to get your insert to sit down in there. Nobody's going to see it. It's kind of like making the opening in your hollow vessel small enough that your finger can't go in there. Nobody can see it to test it. Now I put the ruler in here, I can see that I've got to go a little deeper at the outside, and I check it with my insert, and I still have a ways to go to get the insert in there. So then I sneak up on it. Again, I'm looking down at the cutting edge of this as I make that recess larger, and I don't want to take too much out at a time. Don't ask me how I know that. And you want to lathe with a good braking resistor because you're going to turn it on and turn it off and turn it on and turn it off. That chamfer is going to come in as soon as, what happens is as you get close to the right diameter, the wood will start to grab on that chamfer. The sharp edge here will kind of grab the chamfer on the back of this, and you'll know that you're 2 cat whiskers away from where you need to be. Maybe 3. Yeah, well that lid going around, that was one of the first things I played with acrylic, but I've made complete acrylic boxes, I've made complete resin boxes. I went through a long resin phase. I have a love-hate relationship with resin, but I will say that one of the things that the carbide insert type cutters and tools work great for, especially the negative rake ones, is for the resins and acrylic. I have Alumilite is, I think, it's a great thing to turn, but it doesn't have enough open time for me. On that sheet that I passed around that had some of my boxes, there was one where I put a bunch of wooden pieces into some resin and turned them, and the name of that is one's not like the others or not like the others. There's one round piece and a bunch of square pieces in there. And the Alumilite cures too quickly to do anything with the wood. You can't get anything in there. You pour the resin and you're done. Epoxy, you can get any open time you want, from a few minutes to overnight. But every resin has its pluses and minuses. Boy, I could have made a smaller insert. Okay, now this is starting to grab, so I'm getting close to the right diameter. And I can't get, this tool rest is not cooperating. So now as I'm sneaking up on that, I want to double check that I'm parallel, flat on the bottom, and check my fit as I get close. This is almost as bad as a sanding demo, I realize that. This, yes. Well, We're going to find out, because at home I would glue it with yellow glue. Tonight I'm going to use medium CA glue because it's a demo, and yellow glue wouldn't have time to dry. So I hope it glues well. Yeah, yellow glue works fine. Do you know about rub joints? Mike Hosseluk is who I learned about rub joints from the first time. And if you haven't done it, when you put yellow glue on something, don't just put the glue in and slam it in. Put the glue in and push it in and pull it out and rub it around or rotate it and give it a little activity. Now this is where I was describing, this is the perfect fit right now. The chamfer is grabbing, but the piece won't fit in the hole. So I now know I'm that cat whisker away. The chamfer's holding it, but it's not going to stay there. It won't go in. Does anybody want to come feel what that feels like before I cut it away? Nobody's brave enough? So 2 cat whiskers, and it goes right in. So now we're going to pray to the demo gods, because I didn't sacrifice the demo chicken ahead of time. Who's the world's expert on CA glue in here? I use it, but I don't use it a lot. So I'm going to put, oh yeah, this is my personal tip. I put all my CA bottles in a plastic container with a blue paper towel. I've had 3 of these leak all over my bench and glue my pencil cup or whatever else to the bench. So I just decided belt and suspenders. Okay, so what I'm going to try to do with the CA glue is I'm going to put the CA glue in the recess, and then I'm going to put the accelerator on the Kingwood, and I probably won't get to twist it. It'll just be one and done. At home, I would normally just have the tailstock pulled up, and I would just shove this in with yellow glue and then go do something else in the shop for a few minutes. Yeah. If you're suspicious of it, you can also, a lot of the resinous woods, what I do is I use acetone, and I'll wipe it with acetone before I glue it, just to take the layer of resin off. Well, in this case, it's underneath a glue joint. It's not in a place. Again, this is a very forgiving process because you're doing stuff in a place where people usually aren't going to see things. At home, like I said, I would have this set up. I would just shove the tailstock up and let it sit for 45 minutes or whatever, and go do something else, and then come back. We'll find out if this with the accelerator is good enough. All right, cross our fingers. Yeah, feeling lucky? And I just like to have some kind of a visual idea for what diameter I'm aiming for. I'm going to insert this in. Didn't you see that board that went around with the samples? Don't get it out of sequence. All right, let's see if this works. I'm doing a double insert. Well, I can hear this chattering, so I don't know how well the glue is going to hold. We may have a surprise, but it'll be captured by the tool rest, I think. I don't use CA glue except for filling holes on any gallery pieces. CA glue is not archival. You can use it to fill holes and, put sawdust in or something. A lot of times, like if you're using a lot of the exotic woods, save some sawdust. I have little baby food jars of almost all the woods that I work with commonly. And I just keep a little bit of sawdust in the event that you need it. But I don't use it to do any gluing or make any joints because it's not archival. Yellow glue is archival. Yeah, but you have to be patient. You gotta let it dry. And there's newer versions of different glues, like some of the trim glue that, it's still a PVA or yellow glue, but it's got a higher tack and it dries, it grabs faster and it dries faster. I don't think so. Contact cement, I think, would be good if you had something like if you were trying to do a stone insert, something that's going to move. Contact cement is always flexible, kind of like E6000 if you've used that. All right, a little looser than I'd like, but it is what it is without doing 500 attempts. I'm going to go a little deeper. And I'm getting the lovely aroma of pepper from the Dalbergia. Just want to check that I'm relatively flat and relatively parallel. Looks perfect. And now what I do is, using the same scraper, I'll put a little profile around this edge. You can bring it down as low as you want or make the recess as deep as you want. That's all just artistic choice with the wood and the piece and everything else you're working with. This is just to give you the gist of the technique. And then again here, I would sand to 400. Yeah, I used the Beal to do, that was how I made a lot of, waste blocks and spindle adapters in the early days. Well, my joke is everybody always asks, how long does it take to make a threaded box? And the answer is the first one takes all day, the second one takes half a day, and the person who taught me to make them can do it in an hour and a half demo. I have not succeeded in doing an hour and a half demo with a full threaded box. Yeah. but it's, I'm a really finicky guy, and so, the detail stuff that I want to do in a demo isn't always going to fit in an hour and a half demo. And I can feel Steve giving me the evil eye already. Let's do this two-handed thing again. It's not easy to do threaded boxes, you're right. It takes patience and skill and a little bit of practice. Ah. Yeah, it dripped out. If I had a fourth hand, I'd grab that paper towel. Well, now we have a super glue finish on here in addition to the Pens Plus. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've played with all of them, but, for stuff like this, I don't, if I'm going to do a box, a threaded box that, somebody's going to buy, I don't want to, end up giving them something where the top or some part is going to pop out a year down the road. Yeah. Boom. It's done. And that's, like right now I'm just kind of tapping this to see. Let's go for it. Who's in the line of fire? Yeah. Well, and that's, so light cuts you can do, you can come in here with the gouge. Depending on what tools you're comfortable with, this is just, yeah. Lock down the tool rest. We do that, sand, Pens Plus, and you have an insert. And it's time. I'm not going to do the rest of the finishing. I'll just say, there we go, you get the idea. That's why I made the 6-panel pass around. And there's a double insert. So, like Steve said for the challenge, just do an insert in the top of something, whether it's a pepper mill or a box or whatever you want to do. Just try to do this technique where you make a recess, glue in a piece, make another recess, glue in another piece that's contrasting or has an interesting picture in it or whatever, and just try to do something like that, just to branch out. We've all done finial, well, most people have done finials, but a lot of people haven't done this technique, and I just think it's a nice technique to make some jewel-like quality pieces. So that's all I got.